Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something that I call Take the Doughnut. It's another way to say Carpe Diem. For me, it's all about going after the things that you want in life. And something that I wanted to do this year is rewatch the show Halt and Catch Fire, but this time talk about it with other people. So it all began with episode recaps. I went through and did a recap of each episode. And then I also started to do interviews with cast and crew. And now we're getting into this really interesting space where we have more information we want about the world of the show. So I'm beginning to do these interviews about subject matter related topics that are connected to Halt and Catch Fire. And today we're going to talk about COMDEX. And I have to say, among Halt and Catch Fire fans, this was one of the most requested topics to get more information about, because we show COMDEX in 2 episodes of the show and we create a really interesting world that a lot of us want to know more about. So I'm very excited to talk with my guest today about COMDEX. And just so you all know, we are aiming to keep this spoiler free about Halt and Catch Fire. I'll put some background details so those of you who are not familiar with the show kind of have a sense of what the show is about. But we're really focusing in on COMDEX today. And I'm very excited to talk with my guest, who is Dan Bricklin, who is a businessman and engineer, who is the co-creator with Bob Frankston of VisiCalc, the first spreadsheet program. He also founded Software Garden Inc., of which he is currently president, and Trellix, which he left in 2004. Dan also has a 3-part video on YouTube, which showed his video footage from his experience at COMDEX in 1983. So informative. There's not a lot out there like this. And it shows things like hospitality suites, trade show floors, pitches, close-ups of products and signage, commercials for things like Lotus 123 and the IBM PC XTI or XTL, and Bill.
And the junior.
Yep. And then Bill Gates on the floor even. And so there's so many interesting things to check out in his footage. I'm going to make sure to link them here. But after all of that intro, welcome, Dan.
Thanks a lot, Melissa.
Thank you so much for being here. I can tell you I was really looking because people wanted to hear about COMDEX, and I looked far and wide for people who would be able to speak, especially to COMDEX 83. And when I finally found your videos, it was like an oasis in the desert.
Is there a video of it? Oh my God.
It was more than I could have asked for. I was like,
maybe we'll see them on the floor. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So first of all, before we talk about COMDEX, tell us a bit more about your background.
My background is, let's see, I've been programming since I was a kid. I'm 73 right now. So I was doing it in high school. So that's a long time ago. When you couldn't get computers, I mean, nobody owned their own. You had to go find somebody you could borrow it from. Then I went to MIT and ended up being a computer science, electrical engineering / computer science major. Went to work for Digital Equipment Corporation, which was the largest mini computer manufacturer at the time. I helped develop one of the first word processing, screen-based word processing systems back in '76 or thereabouts. Worked for a company that made electronic cash registers for the fast food market that used chips and all that stuff. So I got to see a small business that way. Then I went to Harvard Business School and I came up with the idea for what we now call the electronic spreadsheet, the one that you can. Excel is the main one today, and Google Sheets to some extent, which directly come from it. If you look at the early videos that are online some places, and I have copies of them from Excel, they talk about how they came from Lotus 123 and Lotus 123 came from VisiCalc. There were a lot of spreadsheets. So I've been around in the industry for a long time. Currently, I'm working at a small company up here that makes software for businesses for doing their business applications. And I work on stuff that involves mobile. I have an app on the iPad, which I wrote. So I've been in the business for a long time. I was there when the Apple II came out. I was there when the IBM PC came out. I had an IBM PC. We had it on a locked room on a board, a piece of wood, where it had just a circuit board that early before they announced it. So I've gone through a lot of that, and I've seen the software companies and a little bit of the hardware companies. And I was involved in enough of the selling that I got to go to the conferences, and the main conference of the year for selling hardware and talking to customers and all that was COMDEX in Vegas. So
Perfect segue. I mean,
yeah,
it's amazing. You just are reading my mind here. So
yeah.
you got footage from the 83 COMDEX that I'm going to direct people to online, but I'm curious how many events you went, how many COMDEX fall events did you go to
Oh,
over the years?
I went to like, let's see, I met somebody who went to really early COMDEX when it was, but that was back like probably around 79 or something like
Okay.
that, or whatever. But starting around, starting by 80, I think I probably went to all of them for a long time.
Do you
You
remember
know,
what your last one was?
no, I mean, no, because eventually going to it would have been harder because I had to pay for it. When I had companies that would pay for going, that was a lot easier. When I had product that I was selling there. But I'd have to look that up. I have a box in the other room that has all my badges and things that I went to.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
yeah, could find some stuff like that.
Hmm.
Uh, and so let's see. So but I went to that was the main one. I also went to consumer electronics shows sometimes. Eventually, COMDEX became more dominant. But initially people would show at consumer electronics where they would show, TVs and stuff for the home. But then COMDEX got bigger and bigger and bigger. So much so that the person who ran COMDEX, Sheldon Adelson, ended up buying a hotel. He saw how big it is to be able to turn it into a bigger convention center because they needed more convention space. There wasn't enough space. So it was, I think, the largest conference in the country during its peak, during its heyday.
Wow.
So you had to be there. And that's coming from Massachusetts, living in Massachusetts, not in Seattle, not in the Bay Area. This was a way to be able to see all these people that I wouldn't see otherwise, and not in New York City, etc. You got to see all the press, you got to see all the hardware people. You didn't have to fly down to Texas. You didn't have to, and because we were all together, we didn't have Zoom.
Hmm.
We didn't have, I mean, being able to get together at a distance didn't happen until COVID,
Yeah.
So I mean, it was possible, but it didn't become major. So everybody would go to that. And so it had to be many things to many people.
Mhm. Okay. Well, let me also provide another angle of context for this because you're doing a great job with that as well. So COMDEX, which you're talking about, we get the fall versions from 1983 and 1990 that are depicted on the show Halt and Catch Fire. It's in seasons 1 and seasons 3 that we get touch points with this event. Halt and Catch Fire itself is going to tell the story of a team of main characters. They all have different technical skill sets or sales skill sets. And they're at the forefront of major tech advancements from 1983 to 1994. So it's a contemporary period piece. And those advancements kind of map onto what we were looking at the time. So we start with personal computers, we're looking at community game and chat forums, we eventually move on to antivirus software, the World Wide Web. So we're getting all of those things sort of depicted over time. And obviously, since we've never heard of these people, they are not the people who succeed. So that's who we're tracking in this show.
Right.
So
So they're not real people in case
they're
of
not
most.
real
They're
people.
not real people. Not only do they not succeed,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of people who didn't succeed who are very important,
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us learn from,
Yeah.
as you see at COMDEX, we learn from each other.
Absolutely. Now, for those of us who haven't experienced COMDEX, paint us a picture of this event. And I know that's a very big question, but
Yeah.
for, what jumps to mind for you when you think about
Yeah.
COMDEX?
So, trying to think. I mean, I do have a web page where I actually have pictures where I went through, I was doing, this is early in the blogging time, and I was doing like photo blogging. and I took pictures, digital camera, but I had to make them very small because we didn't have much memory in the camera or on the screen. And I walked through from flying out there and arriving all the way to flying back. Okay, and what it was like going to the parties and stuff like that. And that was, but that was further. That was in no, 99. But it's the same. It was the same type of thing. COMDEX is a conference that was in Vegas, Las Vegas, and it was mainly in a very large convention center. Many all the hotels all over got filled up. You know, over 100,000 people would show up or something like that. It was huge. And people would get booths, big companies with a lot of money, or people who had a lot of money and wanted to pretend like they're big, would have a big booth. And you'd have people who you try to, like any trade show, you try to get people into your booth. But there's also all the hotels and their hospitality suites. That's where a lot of deals are made. I know people who, let's say if you're a small computer reseller, and you sell to local government agencies. I knew some people who did that. And what they would do is they go to the conference, they go around, they look at the booths and stuff, and they find some interesting product, maybe that nobody else might be selling in their area. And they would then go in the back room and have deals and figure out how they could get it and could they negotiate a good price and stuff like that. And this is what and then, so that would, small manufacturers could be seen because you may catch the eye of somebody who needs just what you have, or that maybe they could be exclusive for you and that would be special for them. And, you know, and then of course they had keynotes and they had sessions you could go to, you know, where things were happening. There were parties that if a company had a lot of money, they could bring in something like the Beach Boys, Four Tops. Having seen, you know, some of them there, that was, you know, the Commodores were one of the ones that I may have pictures of. And so there'd be parties. One of the big parties was done by a particular company that was pushing, had a group they got together that was supporting the Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It was the Chili Bake Off. And this was a really big event because they got a lot of people donating money that went to looking for missing and exploited children. And all these companies would make their version of chili. And you'd go around and taste the different chilies, and whoever won, you know, you would vote for which chili was better. And then they had a concert. And, you know, you had concerts like, what was it? Did we have Willie Nelson at one of them or something like that? And Paul Allen, I remember one of them, who is Bill Gates's partner. He was into playing guitar and he was up on stage playing guitar at there. I mean, it was, you'd walk around and you'd run into Bill Gates. I saw on my blog, I ran into Francis Ford Coppola, because I ran into a person I knew from something, and she had a fund that was being invested by him, and I got introduced to, you know, I met Martha Stewart there because one of the Microsoft people was dating her, and she came to the stuff, and, hey, you want to meet Martha? Here's, you know, and so it was, you would be walking, you didn't know who you were walking by. I mean, Bill Gates and all these other people walking the floor like normal people. And anybody was there. That was the excitement of this, and of course it's noisy, and people try to attract other people to booths. So if you don't have a product that's attracting them because they know about it, you do something. You have entertainers of various sorts. You have famous people signing something or whatever. You have, you know, robots that go around. I have a video, one of them, where somebody is remote controlling this little robot that comes around and you can talk to them, and that's pushing. How do you stand out when there's so many booths? Everybody's trying that. And it was just real exciting to go and to be there for all that stuff. And it happened twice a year. Well, once in Vegas, and the other one was usually, I think, in Atlanta, frequently in Atlanta. for the 1 6 months. The big one was in Vegas.
Hmm. So, oh my goodness, this is so amazing. So the show gives us a little bit of some of those elements. It can't go too far into some of the entertainment acts that you're talking about and some of that stuff because they
Yeah,
have a plot to cover. But in the
right. Well,
show, we'll see things like walking the trade show floor, some of the exhibitor booths, breakout room,
yeah.
people doing product unveilings. We hear mention of keynotes, but we don't actually see any. We see a little bit of activity in the hotel suites. But when you think about all of the types of things that you were just talking about, what to you were the can't miss events in any given
Oh, well,
year?
the Gates keynote, because in those days it was Bill Gates who gave the keynote, who frequently gave the first keynote, and then eventually became when he stopped being Microsoft and all that, different people had become became the main people at these conferences. What was the, I mean, some of these parties and all where you get to see people like the press, the computer press and it was paper that was printed and stuff, getting to see those those reporters and people, the editors and all, that was a big deal. Uh, and I had easy access to a lot of this stuff. I could get into parties because I'd find somebody who knew me and they pulled me in. Okay. And which, but to get an invite, to Spencer the Cat's party or something like that, what do we have here? This was, I think, from this was, I don't know, PC Week was one of the magazines and stuff like that. And, it's, um, but different people had different things they were there for,
Mm.
And, for a lot of people, it's all business in terms of making a deal. Some of it, like if you look at my video, you'll see why are there so many video pictures of keyboards? Well, the reason is I was using home video. In those days you had this big box. I could bring one up or whatever that had the VHS recorder, and you had this big camera you had to carry. And I went around with one of our senior admins, Cheryl Moreau, and she carried that and did a lot while I talked to people and to do the video. And we cared about, for the people back home, we were videoing for our company that couldn't show up there. So a lot of it is they cared about seeing certain things and certain products and how our products, because we want to make sure our people back home, see that how our products are shown and all. So it was aimed at different stuff. It just so happens that they were showing a very early version of Microsoft Windows. And I got a full demo of that, a pretty full demo um, over there. And from a consultant that they had brought in, Gene had come in, I think, and it was, and you can see some other people in the background who were like one of the main people on the Macintosh, I think, would have been there. Every people would go and check out the competition. We wanted to see what the competition. That's why I was, overseeing Lotus and stuff like that. And and even in the back rooms, we had people who were competition who would come in, who we knew would come into the back room and look at our product. Ooh, I'll be able to have do a feature like that, and it's so that's why people look at your badge very carefully. If somebody's covering their badge, they're probably from a competitor. And it's, but you did show, I mean, that's the whole thing. You showed what was public. And so I was interested in seeing certain products maybe that I hadn't seen. I remember one COMDEX going and they had Toshiba, I think, was showing a color LCD. Okay. They could only run it for like a little certain number of minutes at a time and then let it cool off. It was in some big glass case to let it cool off, but to show that they could do color liquid crystal displays. Okay. In other words, the thing that made it possible for us to be able to have color laptops. Okay. And the color display. Everything was black and white before that, or done on a, CRT, this big heavy thing. I have ones here I could show you. And you know, it was exciting because people would show new products that were going to be perhaps. So I like that. As a technologist, I like to see what will be the future. But if you're a computer store of some sort, or if you're a corporate IT department, you have totally different things that you're interested in. And you maybe never got invited to the cool parties and stuff like that. And I remember, a fundraising party that Sheldon and Michael Dell did in one of the suites and stuff like that. There were just so many. Um, it depended on what your group was and what you were there for. And so, in terms of what the viewers of the program are, you theoretically what the goal was, and that would be that part of COMDEX. It's that part of going to a fair. When you go to a big, World's Fair or something like that, what are you going there for? Going to Disney World. Oh, one conference which wasn't COMDEX. Before COMDEX, it was the National Computer Conference, and that was big mainframes did that. COMDEX ended up being for PCs and stuff like that. And they had one in Anaheim in, I think it was 1980. And it's hot and stuff like that. And we were there for that. Apple rented Disneyland. And if you could get tickets, you had the run of Disneyland.
Wow.
You were able to go on Space Mountain and do it over and over again. And I did it like 5 times, because there was no wait. This was, Apple was still a little company, but they were flexing their muscles and stuff. That type of stuff went into, all of that went to COMDEX after that. So that's that. I'm trying to get, now the place was so big. I mean, it's so big. The lines for cabs were huge, were long and stuff like that, to get from place to place. And Las Vegas, the strip is not short, not small. The walk took, especially if you're carrying a lot of your stuff. And I remember showing a product of my own there in 85, 86. I'm trying to remember. And I had a fly lugging a Compaq computer, I think it was, which is a luggable about this big and weighed a lot. I have it in the other room. And a monitor, which I had to ship through, and I had to have a wheelie, to wheel it with, to be able to demo in a demo room my product to some of the press. The product that I wrote in a room that looked like this because it was my last house, Dan Bricklin's demo program, which I wrote for the IBM PC. So, and that publicity was very important. It ended up getting me in some magazines, and that made sales, which paid for this house. So, and I was a very small 1 or 2 person company at the time. And, but I had to lug all my stuff there, and it makes a difference if you can't walk great distances lugging all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you're finding a cheap hotel. Do you stay, do you get to stay at the Hilton where all sorts of people stay, or do you get to say, I mean, the new hotels like the Mirage came up or something, and eventually the Venetian and, whatever. But it was, or you go to some inexpensive place. You're walking across the casino floor. I remember. I want to come down. I got some nice award there. It was I don't know. I have it up here. Some award from PC Magazine, and so I dressed in a tux, and we went there. I even got to share a limo with Gates, who I think was also getting one of the awards there or something. Bob and I did that, but I got to walk through the casino in a tux. That was so cool, except for everybody else is wearing Bermuda shorts and t-shirts and stuff like that. And I felt, here I was thinking James Bond, and I was so out of place walking in there with my tuxedo and stuff. It was very, very real bring down.
You paint such a marvelous picture of this event. And I love the fact that you've been bringing up the event wasn't the same thing to everybody who was there, because you all had different purposes, different stakeholders, different size companies. And I want to look at that a little bit more. So in the show, both COMDEX episodes are going to give us a look at the trade show floor. And we're gonna see a lot of reference to IBM in the episode from 1983 and how they were a behemoth in the computer industry at the time. But we're also going to see representation of a bunch of smaller companies. And a couple of my favorite side characters in the show who come up for both COMDEX episodes. They're two brothers who run a company called Protonics Printers, and they do terrible pitches year after year at COMDEX and somehow still keep coming back. Your videos show a range of businesses, but you also got considerable footage from some of these bigger companies that still exist today. So when you think about the breakdown of the vendors or the companies that were represented there, how much of the event would you say was these huge players in the industry versus how much of it was small companies trying to make a name for themselves?
In terms of numbers of exhibitors, I mean, obviously the little ones all over, all along the edge and stuff like that. There are lots and lots of small ones. And then of course you need some big anchors, and sometimes you wanted to be near the anchor, sometimes, like an IBM or something like that. So, and then of course they take up so much space that compared to a lot of the little ones, number wise, there are a lot of little companies, but it might be a little company that's just making some particular component, and they're waiting for the hardware people, procurement people from IBM, and they're trying to sell to them. I mean, you're selling to each other in many cases. The disk drive manufacturers, they want to talk to the people from IBM and Apple and stuff like that. So it's such an ecosystem of all of and just like the forest has, all the different levels and stuff like that, from the microbes in the ground and the bugs and the whatever to the big animals and stuff. The same thing in big trees. The same thing at a trade show like this. That is the whole industry. All of the different levels are selling to each other, and they're not just selling. They're not an end user going there. This isn't for them.
Mm-hmm.
Though there was interest in it. One of the COMDEXs, we were showing some product or something, and from a PR viewpoint, CNBC decided to follow me for a day with camera crew. I got to be in a cab with a person sitting, in the well of the front seat, shooting up at me in the back seat and stuff like that, and following me around with a microphone. It was, they wanted to see what a day was like, which was pretty interesting. And at one point there, I actually got to go talk to Bill Gates, and of course I quietly turned off my microphone. They did video from a distance. They weren't allowed into the place where I was sitting, so they couldn't hear me talking to Bill. But it was interesting to watch all that. But they're interested in showing the glamour and stuff. They're constantly pushing me to try to, why don't you go dance with that person over there? She looks like a good person to dance with. And I said, no, I'm not up to that. But sure enough, when I talk to my family, the first thing they said, who was that woman? And because they tried to do a video from a distance that showed me talking to somebody. But they're trying to get the human interest of the gestalt of it, and that, look, you're doing deals and they're having meetings in the morning and stuff like that. But for each person, there was a different part to it. So is that?
It does. And I imagine going to something like this, it's probably a really important time for anybody's business. So how are you doing recon at this point? Like, if you want to make sure it's really productive, how were you figuring out who you needed to talk to? Was it just walking around the floor, or were there manuals put out?
First you do your homework.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you have people who can walk the floor for you and come back and tell you where you're supposed to go. So you may split up in terms of that. One person's job is to go around and find interesting things. One is to go talk at certain booths. I frequently had PR things I had to do. I was, if you look at the blog thing, was on some television programs that they were doing for the industry. You know, it was an industry type of PC or whatever program that John Dvorak ran, and I show you about how they do makeup and, you know, and what the teleprompter looks like and all those things. So I was busy doing a lot of meeting people in PR. That was my job. Um, and as you can see in the video I was doing reconnaissance for all these, for my people back home. And I wanted to give them a feel for it because we couldn't bring them there. And I wanted them to get a feel for what it's like when they were there, but also to get to do to show them what you might want to learn there. Different people had different purposes for that. If all you wanted to do is to sell, if you did your hopefully you did your homework in advance and knew which booths you wanted to go to, and you circled where they were, and you made your plans of how you're going to walk, because you couldn't walk that fast from one place to another, and not everything was in the same building. And so, you know, there was the first couple days is pretty crowded, and then it gets less and less as time goes on. So it gets easier if you're willing to stay longer to be able to get more of that. But frequently, a lot of the sales and all, you had to get done quick if you want to sell to all those dealers and stuff. If you're talking to hardware manufacturers or somebody and you want to sell to them a part, you know, you had to get it in the day when they would be there. You probably set up meetings in advance. That was one of the things, is that your people, your marketing, PR, whatever people in advance tried to work out your schedule, because every minute counted. You only had so much time, so that you have, you know, people who show up for this or that, you know, and how can you and you don't want to have competitors show up at the same time, etc. You know, competitors of each other to show up at the same time. So it was logistically tough, but I don't think it's any different, I assume, than any other trade show. A lot of the gimmicks that are done to get people into your booth and all that are not any different. You know, Vegas, there was another trade show at the same time, which was, what was it, Adult Decks or something like that, you know, which was because a lot of it, the video industry, you know, did some of the stuff was there. So obviously the adult video industry, which used a lot of, you know, tech stuff. They were, you know, the first CD-ROM, a lot of the CD-ROM stuff early, and, you know, and videos and videotapes and stuff like that. A lot of tech shows up being used by pornography first. There's money there, and they're willing to take a chance with it. So you have some of that too. And being in Vegas, you know, it sounds like the right place for some of that. That was not my world, so I was not involved in that. So there's a little bit of everything, and I'm sure I missed so much stuff. Luckily, a lot of us came together at some of the things like the Chili Bake Off, which was at UNLV's stadium. You know, it was a huge indoor stadium, and the chili stuff is around the outside, and then the concert and all is inside in the stadium, and you're sitting up in the stands and stuff, and down at the bottom watching Willie Nelson or whatever.
Oh, wow. So some of what you're saying really speaks to, it was you know, you had to really maximize your time on the floor. When I think about the show is, it's a dramatic television show. So the show is really giving us a sense of some of these climactic moments that are happening at COMDEX from a business standpoint. And I'm curious how much of a pressurized environment it felt like when you were actually there. And, you know, do you remember some high stakes situations that were taking place at any of
Oh, it's
your?
different for different people. I mean, obviously, if you have a particular customer that you are targeting, or a particular member of the press that you want to show it to, and if that demo does not go well, you know, or if they miss it because they're busy with your competitor, you know, the sale doesn't happen, that's a big deal. I also was involved. I was on the board they had put together for the conference part of it, which is where you go to sessions, and there were speakers. So I was frequently a speaker, and I got to give, in 91, I think, when I was working at Slate, we were working with these computers that used a pen on them. Um, I was giving a talk about early pen computers and about how you had to write special ways, if people remember the Palm Pilot and stuff, which came out later. And there I was on a Las Vegas stage, and I did something where did rap in front. I turned on some music and I did, so, you can learn to talk with the rhythm if that's a, and I got to rap on stage in Las Vegas. You never know what fantasy you get to live out, even if you don't have a good voice.
Bucket
So
list
I was
item ticked
involved.
off.
Yeah,
You did
right.
it.
Yeah. So, but the thing is that there was that people went there to learn stuff. So those of us that were presenting cared about presenting because it mattered whether you'd get invited to other things to present. And if you got to present at the right shows, I mean, some of the small conferences that cost thousands of dollars to go to with the right investors, that's a big deal for your company. This is all about publicity. It's sales, publicity. I was involved more with publicity, to get known, to get, how do you stand out in the crowd? Are you going to win best in show for a particular, for most innovative new product or something like that out of thousands of products and stuff? There, it's it's filled with. I'm trying to. I mean, I watched a little bit of my video to try to remember some of it, and it just, you remember how you went to bed. If you went to the parties, you're pretty late at night. Then you had to be up really early in the morning to go to the pre-meetings where you and your people would talk about what you're going to do that day and stuff like that. By a couple days in, you're just totally wiped out. And it was, and you're going from one venue to another venue and waiting in the cab lines forever, and it's just so does that give a feeling for, I don't know how the show,
Absolutely.
I'm sure they showed a particular part, and I'm sure whatever it is was probably pretty realistic, if they were trying to meet people, trying to find out about stuff. um you might get one of the people in a booth might slip and say something that they didn't know they're not supposed to, because it's a secret. You don't know if that's gonna, or they may be bragging about some this, salespeople may not be into the details of whatever. And not all the salespeople you had worked for the company. Like when you see me with showing Jane Lewis, I think it was, she was, I guess, a consultant that Microsoft brought in because she was knowledgeable enough to be able to demonstrate this thing, because not all of their people could. Um, you'll see that there's a part that I highlight of Bill Gates walking the floor, and he's talking to John Sachs, who I happen to know. John Sachs, I knew before. John Sachs wrote 1-2-3. He actually wrote the program 1-2-3, which was the dominant spreadsheet before Excel knocked them off, and 1-2-3 knocked us off, and VisiCalc. And you get to hear Bill Gates talking to John about how Microsoft does their development. He's talking to a competitor, a major competitor, saying, "Oh, we use, this digital equipment, such and computer to do running Xenix to do our development, for MS DOS and stuff like, if you're techie, when you see the person in the back who, if you knew, was the person who was the product manager of this particular product, and they were just there." Now, it turned out that that was some of the only informal stuff of Bill Gates around that time, and ended up on PBS, because when they did Triumph of the Nerds, they ended up using footage that I had, because I had some of the only footage from the day the IBM PC was announced. And so I ended up in this Triumph of the Nerds, which was about Microsoft and Apple and Windows and stuff, and about the IBM PC. And they needed something of Gates. And so it was public. So they ended up using a little short piece of that, of the picture of it in the documentary that they were doing, because you get to see. I mean, you don't think of the richest guy in the world walking around like that and looking like such a normal person and stuff. But he is, and at least that's way he was at those. Though I write up about at the conference, at one of the parties, the tradition was for him to dance on the dance floor. And people, all the press, all they want to know is, what do you think of his dancing? Like, who knows? For dancing. But poor Bill, everybody wants him to dance and has to watch him dance, and they're going to be critiquing whatever he does, But that was he went along with his role in the industry and as a spokesperson for the industry at that point. And it was interesting to be able to watch that. And as you could be a salesperson for the smallest little computer company or whatever, and you'd be hobnobbing with famous directors and the richest people in the world and stuff like that at the conference. That was exciting.
Yeah.
You don't even know who some of the people were. I mean, you had no clue, who these people, a lot of the people were, who you're with, and they're you run into, let's say, Philippe Kahn. Philippe Kahn did a company called Borland. Borland made tools for programmers. I don't know if it's in they did Sidekick, which was also, they did Turbo Pascal, and then they did user things like Sidekick, which let you pop up things on your screen and that were useful. And they were a pretty successful company. Eventually got into spreadsheets and stuff. Philippe Kahn later got into thinking that cameras were really cool, that digital cameras were cool, and that we should put a digital camera in the old cell phones of the day. And he's the one who helped get that in there and wrote software to work with cameras in cell phones. And that was a company that he did later on. He was known for bringing a digital camera, maybe a cell phone camera, into the delivery room for one of his children and stuff. And that was like, oh my God, who would do that? Of course, now today we all have cameras in our cell phones, and in a goodly amount, it's because of Philippe, who, when you saw him walking around, you'd have no clue that that's the person who would be responsible for that. Now he's working on, I hear, software that's used in some of those beds that are able to keep track of your, whether your sleep is good or something like that. And still, some of us are still programming today. I'm still doing product. People can still buy my my iPad and iPhone product, Note Taker HD. You can still buy that, from the Apple App Store.
I was just going to ask, are there things that you wanted to plug that you've been working on since? And
well, there's that, and there's there's Note Taker HD, which is on the Apple iPhone and iPad, that lets you draw with your finger. You can draw real big with your finger, and then it shrinks it down so you can, be able to draw on the thing, or you can use before the Apple Pencil and stuff. There are a lot of other ones besides mine. But then I also work for a company called Alpha Software, and I work on a product called Transform that lets you, use your cell phone and fill out forms. It's used on factory floors. Companies that you've heard of use it on the factory floor to, when they look in, or doing quality control and taking pictures and scanning barcodes and stuff like that. And I'm working on that for keeping track of what's going on.
Well, thank you so much for taking time and sharing your experience. I mean, this was so rich, and I can't stress enough that people need to check out the full, all of the videos that you have on YouTube. And I'll also link your website as well, because I believe you have a number of things that are linked in there that people should check out. It's I'm telling you all, I looked for people who would be able to have, I'd be able to have a conversation like this with about COMDEX, and there weren't a lot of people that had content out there that I could even find them. So this stuff that you put out there, it's amazing to hear that even at the time it was being picked up and used in a film or a documentary, because now it is still, it stands high above anything else I've been able to find about this event.
Yeah, well, because we can't create new. We either have it or we don't have it. And some of us were, early adopters of video and in cameras and stuff like that, and early blogging, and documented some of the stuff, and so we have it. We're lucky that some of us did that. So
very.
I hope you got the I don't know what you were looking for in
Oh, this
terms.
is it. I think people are
Of,
going to be very excited about all the
well,
stories that you just shared and a lot of context that I certainly didn't have. And some of these things were reflected in the show, but some of it is so far beyond. You know, it's a whole world that was built at this event that you lived at for, you know, days on
yeah.
end. So
Yeah, and you can see, oh, if you want to see more, if you go to TED.com, if you look up my name, I have a video where I talk about how I developed VisiCalc and why the user interface that you have on Excel today is the way that it is. Why is there ABC 1, 2, 3 and stuff like that?
mm.
And you know, if you like this old type of stuff, while we're still, some of us are, at least some of us are still around. I don't know how much longer. Get your interviews in quick while you can.
I mean, thank you so much for doing this. And I'm just so glad that I had this chance to talk with you. And I'm sure this is going to be really interesting for a lot of people. And if you can hang out for just a little bit longer, but in the meantime, to everybody who's watching this, please go out there and watch Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everyone.